Good afternoon. My name is David Freeze, and this is the BESA webinar. And today we're giving over our platform again to our partners at SHEP. And I'd like to introduce Chris Buxton, who's Chief Executive of the British Fluid Power Association. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much indeed, David. I trust you can hear me. We better do the sound check before we go on.
I can hear you and I can see you. And in honour of this, I've worn a tie. As we said earlier, you put me to shame last time. Good luck with today. A very large audience. I will get out of the way, leave you to get on with it, and hope the presentations go well.
Thank you very much, David, and to BESA, of course. I shall now show my screen and hopefully everybody can see the main slides. As we always do, first of all, a very warm welcome to everybody. As David says, we have about 1,000 people on the webinar today. And in fact, we had about 1,200 registrations. So I'm assured that we will be sending the recording and the slides associated with this webinar, not just to those who have managed to get through, but also to those who registered but were a little too late in managing to get on. So as we always do, for the first couple of minutes, and it will only be a couple of minutes, who are SHEP, or who is SHEP? Well, as I've said in previous webinars, as it says on the screen now, for rather too long, the Health and Safety Executive, of course, have been regarded as some kind of enforcement agency or a police force, actively hunting down the folk who have undertaken HSE misdemeanors. But of course, in reality, that isn't the case. We all know that's not the case. And if anything ever gets to prosecution stage, then it's probably not only the last resort from the HSE's perspective, but it's a sign of failure on all parts. So in reality, in fact, what the HSE is about is protecting our lives and improving our working environment. And it's very well articulated in the strategy document, for those who have a copy, called Helping GB Work Well. Now, like all of us, of course, the HSE has limited resources, more so now than they've ever done, and they can't meet their objectives or fulfill their mission alone. It does require us as industry to contribute to that process, and if you like, create some form of partnership through which we can exchange views, share concerns, and if you like, provide a communications platform. And that is really where SHEP comes in. As the name suggests, a safety and health engineering partnership is exactly that. It's a partnership between industry, the engineering industry particularly, and the HSE, and it's a means of ensuring that communication between the two bodies is optimized in the best interests of all parties. So what is today's webinar all about? Well, as we know, quality equals safety, and along with quality comes productivity. So the three, safety, quality, and productivity, are inextricably related. And in order to maintain that quality, you need some kind of standard. And as we all know, traditionally, that has been represented by the European CE mark. Well, again, as we all know, with the breakup of, or a breakaway from the EU by GB, what we've ended up with now is a UKCA mark. And as the literature says, it covers most goods, which previously required the CE marking, but it doesn't include them all. So we do still need, in certain circumstances, the CE mark. And then just as we thought it was safe to go back into the water, we spotted another shark in the form of the Northern Irish Protocol, and that introduced yet another variable, the UKNI, UK Northern Irish mark. And as a consequence, when and how we apply all of those different marks has introduced a certain amount of confusion. So the purpose of today is to try and remove that confusion and provide you with a platform to ask questions. Our agenda comprises of two speakers. I'll introduce them when they arrive, so to speak. But it's Benedict Luckin from BEIS and Paul Menning from the BSIF. and they will both speak for around about 15 to 20 minutes each, after which we'll have a Q&A session. Now, we hope to finish as close to the hour as possible, because we all know how webinars that overrun on Zoom meetings and the like, or in this case, GoToMeeting, can be quite wearing, and we have other things to do. So I'm going to hand over straight away, but just before I do, if you could put your questions into the question box. If you're used to Zoom, you'll be putting them into the chat box, but under GoToMeeting, they call it the question box, and that's in the usual place to the right of the screen. With 1,000 people on the webinar, it's unlikely that we're going to get through anything like all of the questions that we're going to be asked. So we will, of course, be sending a video of this event to all of those that registered, as I mentioned earlier, and we'll also try and get answers to the questions that are raised and circulate them accordingly. So first of all, let me introduce Benedict. Now Ben worked in the goods regulation team at BEIS, and there he's responsible for industry engagement regarding the domestic product marking and labeling regime. So he's ideally suited to this particular presentation, and he's going to be covering the CA, CE marking, and the changes and so forth in responsibility for the economic operators, and of course the goods regulation when it comes to the Northern Irish Protocol. So Benedict, I'll hand over to you. If you just ask me to change the slides as you see fit, with next slide, I will do the honors for you. Over to you, Benedict.
That's great. Thanks very much, Chris. Hi, everybody. Good to meet you all. As Chris mentioned, I work in the goods regulation team at BEIS, covering business readiness. So could I get the next slide, please, Chris? So the focus of today's presentation will be on new approach goods for those who aren't familiar. So those which are regulated before at EU level through directives and regulations, and where harmonised standards are used to achieve compliance to those. So it's typically recognised by the CE marking in the EU. Obviously, we're not in the EU anymore. We have our new UK Conformity Assessed marking, which replaces the CE marking. So I'm going to talk you through how the UKCA marking works, the timescales associated with that, the concept of placing on the market, and rules and changes affecting economic operators. The only other thing I would say on this slide quickly is the change of position for non-harmonised goods. So the mutual recognition no longer applies for non-harmonised goods, i.e. those which aren't regulated under a common regulatory framework. So if you, for example, export into the EU, you'll need to comply to the rules of the first member state you're exporting to, rather than the EU recognising UK regulations for those types of products. So certain furniture products, foodstuffs, things like that. Next slide, please. Great. So it's worth saying up front that the essential requirements and standards to achieve compliance are the same now as they were before, except we're looking at designated standards rather than EU harmonised standards to achieve compliance. There may be other changes you need to make, but there is guidance for specific sectors on govern. Because this is a high-level presentation today, I won't be going into all of those. But in terms of actions you can take, it's really important to be sure and aware of which regulations apply to your product, and begin the process of securing any product approvals as soon as possible if you need them. Being aware of the changes to the status of economic operators and complying with those. I'll cover them later in the presentation. Making sure you're labelling your products appropriately if required to as well. Next slide, please. So one thing that's really important is this concept of placing on the market. And placing on the market refers to essentially an offer or agreement to transfer possession or ownership in relation to individual goods. And it's quite a legalistic term, but in practice, it mostly means you've made it and somebody's bought it, or you've made it and there's a contract to hand it to somebody else, or there's an offer to purchase it, and your good is moving towards the end user through a distributor or otherwise. So placing on the market can mean a lot of things, but it's really important to understand that definition in terms of the timings of when things have changed and when things will change. So before the end of last year, when we were in a transition period from the EU single market to not being part of that at all, the European Union and the UK agreed under the withdrawal agreement to allow goods placed on the market for the end of last year to circulate freely until they reach their end user. So if the goods are placed on the market before the end of 2020, they don't need to be remarked at any point. That's absolutely fine. And to ease this transition for businesses for the GB market, we've accepted the CE marking for most goods for this year. And I say most goods because it's longer in some cases for things like medical devices and rail interoperability parts. So until 2022, the CE marking is fine. And from 2022 onwards, you'll need to be compliant with the UKCA rules. And of course, if you export to the EU, there are no easements or transitional measures on the EU side. You need to comply with all EU rules straight away. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of these really. So the point I just made about placing CE mark goods on the GB market. So I say GB because we talk about Great Britain, Scotland, Wales, and England. Separate rules apply in Northern Ireland, which I'll cover because Northern Ireland is still aligned with the EU. So CE marking is fine for most products. If you self-declare compliance, that's okay. If you use an EU notified body, that's also okay. So if that's you in these circumstances, you continue placing CE mark goods on the market this year, that's absolutely fine. You only need to use UKCA straight away now if your certificate of conformity, if you have one, is held by a UK conformity assessment body. In those circumstances, UKCA needs to be used now. But generally speaking, most of the time, CE marking on goods, fine for this year, absolutely. And it's from next year that the UKCA marking is required. And the rules around that are the same. So if you self-declare for CE, you can self-declare for UKCA. If you require conformity assessment, you'll need to get that done by a UK approved body. I'll cover that a bit more later. Just quickly, bullet 3 on the left of the slide is around placing markings on the same products, and this is something we get a lot of questions about. So the CE marking and the UKCA marking can appear alongside each other, so long as neither impedes the visibility or legibility of the other one, and that they are actually compliant with the relevant regulatory requirements of GB and EU regime. Next slide, please. This is just to summarize the timeline, and there are a few important things to emphasize as well that I haven't covered already. So you can use the UKCA marking now. It's come into effect. You can use it, and we'd encourage businesses to start using it as soon as possible. If you require third-party conformity assessment, we'd really encourage you to contact a UK-approved body as soon as possible if your certification is held by an EU notified body. Another thing coming into effect this year, important if you're an exporter to the European Union or Northern Ireland, is the EU's Market Surveillance and Compliance of Products Regulation. Essentially, it means if you sell goods online to end users, I'm paraphrasing it for the purpose of this, but if you sell goods online to end users, you need to have an authorized representative in the EU or NI market to handle your compliance documentation. So worth being familiar with that if you weren't aware this was coming into force, and it comes into force in July. So as I mentioned, UKCA required for most goods that require the CE marking from next year. Again, I say most because it's longer for things like medical devices and rail interoperability parts. One of the other things we've done as well to ease the transition is until 2023, you can affix the UKCA marking on a label affixed to your product, or it can be on accompanying documentation. So that applies from now till 2023. And from 2023, you need to apply UKCA basically in the same way you'd apply CE marking now. The key thing is check the legislation relevant to you. What does it say? Does it say affix it on the product or packaging or accompanying document? Check the relevant legislation. That's what I would say. Next slide, please. So I've covered this a bit in my presentation about conformity assessment bodies. So if you self-declare compliance, i.e. you carry out your risk assessment and then you say, yes, this is fine, you sign your declaration of conformity and affix the marking, this isn't going to be relevant to you. But if under the regulations you're required to undertake third-party conformity assessment, so this is mandatory, this is going to be relevant to you. So for the Northern Ireland market, UK bodies doing conformity assessment there will, for that specific purpose, Northern Ireland market will be notified bodies. That's the key thing to note. So I'll talk more about the UKNI marking later, but it's only required when a UK conformity assessment body has provided conformity assessment against EU rules for the Northern Ireland market only. I'll talk more about that. Big change for notified bodies, as they were called, is for the GB market. They're now called approved bodies, and the details of those can be found on our UK MCAP database. The slides will be shared with you after, but within each that we've got lots of QR codes where you can go and find the guidance in the relevant pages. So hopefully that's useful. And you know what the position of now from the 1st of January was any mandatory conformity assessment by a UK body isn't recognised by the EU. So if you place product on the EU market that requires conformity assessment, it needs to be done by an EU recognised notified body. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick note in terms of what was achieved in the trade negotiations last year. There wasn't a mutual recognition agreement. So this is to re-emphasise the point. So UK bodies can't assess for CE and EU bodies cannot assess against the UK CA marking. So if you sell on both markets, GB and EU, you need separate certificates. So it can't be this. It's not the same certificate. It's a separate certificate, separate declaration of conformity. That's what we'd advise you to do because we haven't got a clear view from the EU on what their preference is. So that's the most sensible and cautious, risk-averse route to take right now. So get separate certificates if you require them ready well in advance at the beginning of next year because they take time to process. So act now on that point. We couldn't emphasize that enough. Next slide, please. So I mentioned at the beginning, economic operators, which is quite a policy, legal, technical term, but essentially means those who are sort of involved in and handling CE marked, UK CA marked goods, what have you. And economic operators is define the legislation. So you have manufacturers, importers, distributors, and authorized representatives. And the roles and responsibilities of those have changed now. We're not in the EU anymore. So what's happened is UK distributors of goods coming from the EU, in some circumstances, may have become importers. An importer is someone who places a good on the GB market for the first time from outside of the UK. So a business in Northern Ireland can still act as an importer for GB. I'll talk more about that later, and if you have any questions, I'll happily go into it in a bit more detail. But essentially, that's a key change. So if you're a distributor of goods coming from the EU, check your responsibilities. If you're an importer, check with who they're coming from, the manufacturer, just to make sure all that is sorted. And the position for authorized representatives. Now, authorized representatives are usually optional, with some exceptions like medical devices, and they're required for cosmetic products too, where they're called responsible persons in the legislation, but it's a similar thing. So authorized representatives for the GB market need to be based in the UK, so including Northern Ireland too. And if you need an authorized representative for the EU market, they need to be based in the EU or Northern Ireland. Again, Northern Ireland remains in regulatory alignment with the EU. That's a really important thing to factor in with this when you think about the UK. You've got the GB regime and you've got NI, which essentially is the same as EU rules. So it's like the EU for the purpose of regulating goods. Next slide, please. I've talked a lot about this now. I'm going to actually cover it properly. So as many of you will be aware, the Northern Ireland Northern Ireland Protocol is now in force. And what it means is Northern Ireland needs to comply with, Northern Ireland remains in regulatory alignment with the EU for as long as the protocol is in force. So that means the CE marking is still the relevant market for most goods. So if you self-declare against CE or you have a certificate of conformity held by an EU notified body, you still use the CE marking when selling the good on the Northern Ireland market. In terms of what the UKNI marking is then and what it's for, well, when a UK notified body, so it's called a notified body in this context because it's assessing against EU rules, solely for the NI market in this context, UK bodies can't assess the EU market, but they can for NI. That was agreed through the protocol. Right. So in that circumstance, a UK notified body, as called in this context, has assessed against EU rules for goods being placed on the NI market. In those circumstances, those goods need to bear a CE marking plus the UK NI marking. So the UK NI marking never appears on its own. And essentially its purpose is to indicate that a UK notified body has carried out the assessment. And because of that, the EU doesn't recognise those bodies. We didn't secure a mutual recognition agreement. The UK NI marking is to indicate those goods can't be placed on the rest of the EU market, but can be placed on the market in Northern Ireland. So hopefully that helps to clarify that point, but I'll answer more questions later. So the UKCA marking isn't for the Northern Ireland market. It's not valid for the Northern Ireland market. It's only for GB, just to clarify. Next slide, please. So just quickly in terms of qualifying Northern Ireland goods, this is not an area of expertise for me. So if you have really particular questions on unfettered access, I'm not the person for you. But in terms of what it means from a product marking perspective, essentially, if something's a qualifying Northern Ireland good, so it's a good in circulation in Northern Ireland that's not subject to any customs control, is broadly the definition in the legislation. If that good is being placed on the GB market by unfettered access, it can continue to have the CE marking on it after next year and for as long as the protocol is in force. and it can have the CE and the UKNI mark on it if it needs, if that's required, for as long as the protocol's enforced. That's how unfettered access works. It's one way, it's Northern Ireland's GB, it's not the other way. If you're a GB business selling in Northern Ireland, it's like selling on the EU market, essentially. That's the way to think about it. Next slide, please. So again, the responsibilities of economic operators have changed in Northern Ireland too. What that means is they'll be the same as an EU economic operator in terms of placing goods on the market. So distributors in Northern Ireland might now be importers of goods from GB, because it's like they've come from a non-EU country, a third country. That's essentially the position. And the other thing as well is businesses, and this is a bit that can sound confusing, but it is. Let me just explain it, which is Northern Ireland business placing a good on the GB market from outside the UK is an importer for the GB market. So if you like, there's not this workaround for unfettered access where you just route goods from the EU through Northern Ireland and place them on the GB market. That's not how unfettered access is intended to work. We do have quite a lot of guidance on that on Gov, so do consult that if you want to read more about unfettered access. Next slide, please. So that's essentially the end of my presentation. Just next slide, Chris. This is just to talk you through what you'll get with the slides that I sent out after. So here are all the QR codes I mentioned with all the relevant guidance. Next slide again, please. There's some more, so some on conformity assessment bodies. The previous slide, that was about placing on the market. One more slide, please. Yeah, and this is my final slide. So there's guidance for, as I said, qualifying Northern Ireland goods, and generally regulation-specific guidance at the Office of Product Safety and Standards released, which you can find on that final QR code. For any queries on the guidance, give us an email at goodsregulation@bays.gov.uk. Email address at the bottom of the slides there. And that's it. That's the end of my presentation. So I'll hand back to Chris, who I believe is handing over to Paul. And I look forward to talking through your questions at the end. Thanks very much.
Benedict, thank you very much indeed. We knew it wasn't going to be straightforward, but you've done a lot to shed light on the situation for us. Thank you. For those who put in a message that they're having a little bit of a problem with some of the audio, we're seeing if there's anything we can do at this end. It may well, of course, be a local issue for those people who have had a problem. We've had 2 people say they're having issues with sound. I will now go straight over to the next speaker, who is, of course, Paul Manning from the British Safety Industry Federation, I beg your pardon. The BSIF is the UK's leading trade body within the safety industry, and that they've got members including manufacturers, distributors, test houses, certification bodies, safety professionals, and other service providers. And their aim is essentially to provide support and guidance on a wide range of occupational safety issues. So at that point, what I'm going to do is hand over the presenter status, so to speak, to Paul. So if people can bear with us for one moment, you should now, as unlike Jackie Weaver, Paul, you do have the authority now, I think. Ah, good. We can see your screen. I will step back again and leave you to speak.
Thank you very much, Chris, and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this segment of the BESA webinar. My name is Paul Manning. I'm the British Safety Industry Federation's membership manager, and BSIF, of course, as has been explained, is the UK's trade association for the safety industry. So I wanted to cover up some of the points that have been raised there with Benedict very well, but these following slides will be a unique safety PPE perspective. So I'm just going to make those full screen for everybody. Okay. So we're going to cover off the legislation change, an overview of that, the UK Conformity Assessment and the UK Northern Ireland marks. Where do they apply? Next is how do they apply? CE mark, does it still apply? Markings and documentation, and a little bit about ensuring your supply chain is compliant. Okay, legislative effects of the UK Conformity Assessment mark. The requirements of the PPE Regulation 2016/425 have now been transferred, and we are calling that in Great Britain the Regulation 2016/425 on PPE as brought into UK law and amended. And of course, it is still Regulation 2016-45 on PPE in Northern Ireland. The regulation is substantially the same technically as the previous EU regulation. All terms of compliance and existing obligations or responsibilities are included as is in the application of the UK regulation. Harmonised standards as of the end of 2020 have been published now as UK designated standards. There will be no change technically, as I've said, in the requirements or provisions of the existing standards at this point. A new mechanism is being created to update UK designated standards should EN standards be reviewed, which could happen, and amended thereafter 31st of December 2020. British Standards Institute, our national standards body, will remain members of the CEN-CENELEC for European standardisation. And market surveillance authorities will still remain as the HSE for PPE at work and trading standards for private users. Excuse me. So new rules, just to reiterate that, is that Great Britain is consisting obviously of Scotland, England and Wales, new rules for Northern Ireland and new rules for the European Union. So the OPSS, Office for Product Safety Standards, is responsible for guidance on the conformity of manufactured goods within the UKCA regime. And conformity assessment bodies, notified bodies, then became approved bodies in Great Britain on the 1st of January. The UKCA mark is to be used in GB from at 1st of January this year onwards. However, CE marking is permitted for most products until the end of this year still. UKCA marking must appear on products sold from the 1st of January 2022. Manufacturers will, however, as was previously stated, be allowed to add an over sticker with the UKCA mark and any accompanying documents after the 31st of December 2022. Northern Ireland is a different situation due to the Northern Ireland Protocol and having unfettered access to GB. Let's get rid of this. And CE mark products supplied into Northern Ireland can be sold into Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So, having a little look at the categories of PPE. The first one we'll look at together is category 1, which is minimal risk. And we're just going to look at the differences there that apply. So the Ppe legislation currently, the Ppe regulation 2016-425, as we've said, it's technically the same, but has been renamed as brought into UK law and amended. We'd look at a typical standard for innocuousness testing on gloves there. It is called EN ISO 21420 and will then be called BS EN ISO. So that will be created, that then becomes the designated standard. Sorry about this. The risk category 1, there's no changes there. The CE mark will become the UK Conformity Assessment mark. That will appear on both the product or the closest packaging. And declaration of conformity in the user instructions will need to be then repeated for CE if the product is to be sold there, and also for the UK in our UKCA version as well. No changing in content except where appropriate references to the UK approved body and the UK designated standard, and a change to the reference in UK legislation. Category 2, the intermediate risk. So these are things that are not minimal risk, and these are things that are not high risk, therefore intermediate risk. Same again with Ppe legislation, Ppe regulation, and UK law and amended. And the product standard there is a construction helmet one that I've used as an example, becomes BSCN. Again, risk is still category 2. The marking is CE for the EU and UK CE for us. Again, both on the product and the nearest packaging. Documents again will need to be for CE, declaration of conformity and user instructions, and one for the UKCA as well, declaration of conformity and user instructions. The final category then, the high risk. category 3, which is the highest one we have. So we have the Ppe regulation again, EN 149, which is the respiratory standard. Risk categories remain the same. The marking, CE mark and notified body number for CE, the UK CA mark and the approved body number for Great Britain. But again, both on product and all closest packaging. Declaration of conformity again, user instructions the same, no change to content except where appropriate references to the UK approved body and the UK designated standard, and a change to the reference to UK legislation. IDLH, by the way, if you were wondering, is injurious to death on life and health threatening situation, that hence the high risk category. So looking at an EU, well, what was an EU certificate, and these will now need to be changed to the UK CE mark. So an approved body will need to issue one of these for PPE products. And looking at the next section, then that will need to be amended to read the PPE regulation as brought into UK law. Okay, and then obviously we'll then need to have the approved body details and address there as well. So this is just a sample of what you should see. So you'll have an EU type certificate for the CE, and you'll have a UK conformity assessment certificate for the UK. Also, there will need to be a new declaration of conformity issued. Okay, so that will reading from the left and going anti-clockwise there. Obviously, the standard will become the designated standard BS EN. We'll read UK CA mark there from the approved body, or UKNI. The declaration itself will be titled UK CA or UKNI. The regulation needs to change to UK law and amended, and obviously the approved body, the numbers will remain the same. New product markings then as of the beginning of this year. So where we see a category 3 item of PP, as we are with the mask here, the filtering face piece, you will need to see the UK conformity assessment mark there in place, or as well as, if it's to be sold in both markets, as the CE mark. So marking products with multiple marks is permitted, provided the manufacturer can prove that they have relevant assessment of each product to each of the marks by relevant assessment authorities. So we are currently seeing a beginning of products starting to go through approved bodies to gain the UK conformity assessment mark, but as we've said earlier, that we have a year still before we make that final move towards UK conformity assessment. So ensuring compliance, really just to reiterate those points, check that the markings match the declaration of conformity, the product itself, make sure they match the packaging and any certificate provided. If they are missing or different, contact the manufacturer or supplier for clarification, proof of compliance. Contact the approved body for UK conformity assessment or notified body for CE to check if certificates are legitimate. Most notified bodies, approved bodies, will have an address, an email address that you can send certificates through to. Always use a BSIF registered safety supplier. BSIF registered safety suppliers commit to only providing compliant product. We annually audit all of our members for their PPE and quality management systems, and their staff commit to training to a publicly recognised level 2 off-call qualification. Just a couple of useful addresses for you all. The approved bodies in the UK can be found at the above address, the government website, where all UK approved bodies for the UK conformity assessment mark, and of course still the original European EU CE mark notified bodies are still found on the NANDO website at the bottom there. All of these addresses will be available to you after this webinar. Finally, just a last few useful guidance. Guide to the PPE regulations is currently available, issued by the OPSS, available through this or our website or direct. We also have a guide to the PPE regulations from Northern Ireland. The PPE regulation itself is listed there, and a full list of designated standards. And finally, a useful document that we recently released, which is all about is it genuine, and a guide to documentation for PPE and what to look out for and what is correct. And that takes me through to the end of this segment. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
We'll hand back over to Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're able to hand over presenter rights back to me, let's see if the system worked for us. And if it has, everybody should now be seeing the holding slide for Paul and the agenda. And you'll see, hopefully, you should be seeing now. That completes our two formal presentations. We now have 25 minutes, which is a good, reasonable amount of time to undertake the Q&A session. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now completely, and hopefully you can now see me again, and hopefully if I can ask Ben and Paul to show their screens as well, we can start taking some questions. Thank you, Ben, you've just become visible. One of the first questions that came through here, and I apologize that I can't see who it was that posed the question, because we've had a minor technical problem. So the questions are being fed through to me through our private chat box, the organizer's chat box. But the first one that came through here, it says, we are placing the UK importer address on the manual. Are digital manuals accepted, or will a hard copy need to be available? I think that's probably one for you, Benedict, first, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So importer addresses can go on accompanying documents for goods that are coming from the European Economic Area and Switzerland until the end of next year, right? But it has to be in accompanying documents. It has to be something that accompanies the product, not necessarily on a one document per product basis until it reaches the end user. So basically having it on a website isn't sufficient. It's fine to include a link to your web page, but ultimately it needs to be in a document that does accompany the product or batch of products.
Okay, thank you for that. Paul, I don't know if you need to add anything to that, do you?
No, that's very good, thank you.
Inclusive, okay. By the way, I should have said, Paul, thank you for taking a practical example. A couple of people have asked about why you chose PPE. Well, we could have chosen more or less any product that was relevant to illustrate the purpose of the different marking regimes and so on. So to the question, why did we choose PPE? Because it was something that was common to everybody in one way or another. And we were simply illustrating the regimes and how they apply to a given product. Okay, another question's come through. Under PURE, P-U-W-E-R, of course, in 1998 regulations, there's a requirement. Sorry, I'm pausing because the syntax is unusual. It says under PURE 1998, there is a requirement for the CE documentation. It should be, is there a requirement for the CE documentation, and will this change? Benedict?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of individual products, like what the if your product is in scope of the legislation for the CE marking, it's also going to be in scope for the UKCA marking. So the requirements in terms of documentation are the same for both. So drawing up the declaration of conformity, having the technical file, and all the rest of it will still be required. For our guidance for placing goods on the market in GB, it does include a list of legislation that's in scope, so it's probably worth checking that and familiarising yourself with the relevant content. I mean, the headline message is, what was required for CE under the legislation is also what's required for UKCA under the legislation.
Okay. Okay. Paul, if any of the responses you need to add to, please jump in. Another one come through here. We're getting slightly more technical and highly specific here. With no MRA in place between UK and the EU, can ISO 17025 be used to encourage sharing of data between the UK and the EU and vice versa in order to reissue test reports in both cases? My goodness, there's a challenge for you, Benedict.
Yeah, so I think in terms of sharing information between conformity assessment bodies, that's something that is fine. And under the withdrawal agreements, there is provision for conformity assessment bodies to share information, so they are required to do so. It's Article 46, I believe, in the withdrawal agreement, which requires that. So yeah, it's definitely possible. I mean, in terms of getting certification for both markets, what we recommend to people is approach your existing body and find out what plans they've made to potentially enable you to get conformity assessed for whether it's the GB market or the EU market. That's what we'd recommend. So yeah, the terms of withdrawal agreement allow the sharing of information. There's no reason why conformity assessment bodies can't share it between each other, and you should probably approach your existing one to find out what their plans are for providing conformity assessments for both markets.
Okay, okay, thank you. And a somewhat more generic question, really. Will importers to the UK be required to add the UKCA mark, or will we still be accepting CE marking? I think that's probably time dependent, isn't it? Who would like to take that one?
I can take that one. I guess the question is, in terms of whose responsibility it is to affix the marking, only a manufacturer or authorized representative can do that. So the manufacturer, obviously the person who makes it, or the person who provides their trademark and sells the good under their brand, who therefore like assumes the role of the manufacturer, if you like. So those are the two circumstances where manufacturers would apply the marking. And then authorized representatives, if they receive a written mandate from the manufacturer saying, you know, you should perform these roles in relation to this market, all that kind of stuff. So those are the only people who can fix the marking. So the importer is not responsible for doing that and can't do it. The importer's role is to check that the marking is affixed, essentially, so that because the importer is somebody who places goods on the market. They need to place compliant goods on the market. So, for example, if a CE mark product comes in this year and they're providing it onto a distributor, or they're selling it to somebody, what have you, the importer is responsible for checking that the right markings are on the product. That can, for this year, in most cases, and I say most again because earlier I talked about medical devices, rail interoperability not being in scope. But for most of those products, it's about checking, if you're an importer, that the CE markings on them, which is fine for the rest of this year. It's not fine next year. And checking UKCA markings on it as well, which is fine this year and next year. I hope that answers the question.
Just to add to that, we have, if people would like to patch themselves through to BSI's website, we have quite a useful document which is entitled Who Am I? Which is a flow chart and will help you to identify which economic operator you have now become. So that will be a useful tool, which I can obviously pass along after this webinar.
Okay, and that's on your BSI website, is it, Paul?
Yes, it is, but I can add it to these slides if that's more helpful.
Before we circulate them, I think that would be helpful. Thank you for that. Another question's come in. We have a very large selection, actually. After January the 22nd, can we use CE only marked items in an assembly if we risk access to them and decide they're safe to use, e.g. because they meet the same essential safety requirements? So after January the 22nd, can we use CE only marked items in an assembly if we risk assess them and decide they're safe to use, e.g. because they meet the same essential safety requirements?
So there are quite a few points to note with regards to components in a full assembly, and it depends on the regulations. So if the regulations require individual components to be conformity marked, if those components being placed on the market, for example, after the 31st December this year to the beginning of next year, if they're required to be individually marked, they'll need to have the UKCA marking. And if the overall assembly is required to have the UKCA marking, if that's placed on the market next year, it will need the UKCA mark. The point is worth noting, okay, so if you have components which are placed on the market this year and have the CE marking, those can be used in an overall assembly that can have the UKCA marking if placed on the market next year. So again, like placing on the market is a really important definition here, and like understanding that and the timings of when something has or hasn't been placed on the market is really, really important. If you're talking about spare parts, the position is slightly different, but I won't go into that now because I don't want to take too much time. But the position on spare parts is the same as it was before. So, you know, what the EU rules on spare parts, which you can read about in the blue guide, are the same for us, basically. They still apply. But yeah, it's all about placing on the market. When it's placed on the market next year, it needs UKCA. If it's this year, it needs CE, basically, or can have CE or UKCA.
Yeah, okay. Paul, do you need to add to that at all?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, another question's come in, a much simpler one. Has the marking been agreed for sheet metal ductwork?
I think it depends in terms of, so the regulations for the new legislative framework, so like obviously CE marking, right? They're all the same. So if it was covered in scope of the relevant legislation before, if it was, for example, like construction products regulation or so forth, like it will still apply now. But in terms of individual products, we always recommend, you know, people check the guidance or the legislation itself, or like a trade association or their solicitor, because ultimately, like as government, we can't tell you whether your specific products are in scope of the regulations or not.
Right, and presumably the viewers will be able to get the various links from the end of your slides to get that information. Okay, thank you for that. There's one question which has come through here, which is an interesting one because I know it relates to rules of origin. And I've had this question through some of our members at BFPA. And it reads, we have a box of mixed parts from all over the world, including the EU and non-EU countries. So it's a box of mixed parts from all over the world. The parts need to be assembled at their final destination to make one product or system. Now they come through the UK and are destined for Northern Ireland. So what kind of marking do we need and how do we label the products for transit? And then the question I put in brackets, I'll refrain from asking about rules of origin in this situation. So it's a mixed box of goods all over the world coming through Britain, destined for Northern Ireland. How the heck do they label it is what they're asking really.
No, I mean, I'm grateful for not going too much on rules of origin because I simply wouldn't be able to help that much. So the thing that's really important to recognise, and this is, I appreciate from a business perspective, this isn't the most business friendly, but it's the way the like parallel regulatory regimes work, if you like. So the market labelling side of things doesn't really have anything to do with like the customs or transit side of things. It's all about which market the goods being placed on, rather than where the goods are coming from or where they're coming through, right? So like in the EU, the CE marking is required, and that doesn't matter if the good's made in China and it goes through, let's say it just goes straight to GB and then to EU, for argument's sake. Like none of that stuff matters. It's all about being compliant with the relevant regulations in the market. So if you're placing goods on the NI market, they need to have the CE marking if you self-declare compliance, or if you use the EU notified body. If you use a UK notified body for those goods, they need to have the UKNI marking plus the CE marking. So the NI, because the Northern Ireland Protocol remains in regulatory line with the EU, so compliance to EU requirements is still required for Northern Ireland, essentially. So what you were doing before the end of last year probably is going to be the same for Northern Ireland, unless you have a certificate of conformity from a UK notified body, which I don't know if you do in your case. There you go.
Okay, I remember a recent discussion with the BEIS official on this type of query, and they suggested that sometimes there comes a point when the situation becomes so complex that it may be easier simply to pay tariffs, and rather than try and unpick the situation. I don't know if that's a little bit of a defeatist attitude, but I guess when it comes down to it, that's one of the many balances that have to be struck.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, tariffs, rules of origin, it's not something I like opine on really, because I know about the marking, the regulatory aspects, but the sort of like trade tariffs, rules of origin, I guess it's always down to the individual business to make a commercial decision about what's in their best interest, isn't it, really, on that point? But yeah, I probably don't have much else to say. If you have questions on rules of origin, though, like I can send them to the right people who can hopefully get an answer. So there's that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Paul, jump in at any point, as I say earlier. Another question's come through. It says, for long lead equipment ordered and specified under the CE rules, but not now due for delivery until 2022, is the CE marking alone acceptable as it's after the 1st of January 22? Or does the manufacturer / user require to recertify under the new CA mark?
Yeah, so it's a good question. If they're placed on the market in 2022, yes, but if they're placed on the market before, so they're like made available for supply and they've been bought, it's more likely to be the case that CE is fine because they've already been placed on the market, essentially. I think being familiar with that definition is really important for these circumstances. How each product goes through in terms of long lead time, where it's moved from, what the contractual arrangements that sit behind it look like. That's why I'd be reticent about providing like a definitive answer on whether you've placed it on the market or not. But like the thing you need to figure out in that situation is when it's placed on the market, is your current contractual arrangement with a lead in time and all the rest of it, does that satisfy the definition or does it not? And if that's something you have trouble with, it's one of those things that's worth probably seeking legal advice or an opinion of the trade association on. Hope that's helpful. And yeah, sorry, I appreciate I'm taking up quite a lot of airtime, Paul. Sorry, if you want to come in, just do.
Yeah.
That's fine. As far as the interpretation of this is that, well, the truth is that we can accept the CE mark for the rest of this year. From 2022 to the end of the following year, goods can be over-stickered. That's important to note because that will obviously help a lot of people to continue this documentation transition. So over-stickering is going to be allowed for a further year, and then after that it will be UK conformity assessment on the product or the smallest packaging appropriate without damaging the goods.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Another question, they're coming thick and fast. I purchase products from the EU and then sell in the UK, NI and EU. Will I need to certify the product or will my supplier need to do this?
It depends which role you'll perform, who's who in the transaction, if you like. So like manufacturers and authorized representatives are responsible for the marking. But if you're an importer or a distributor, you check the right markings on the product essentially. So you need to work out with your manufacturer or their authorized representative in that kind of situation.
Okay, thank you for that. I can see you nodding there, Paul.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, now we're going sector specific. We're an agricultural business that buys, in inverted commas, buys a large amount of machinery that is bespoke, built for us and imported to us in the UK. Am I correct in thinking from Benedict's presentation that we would now need to request them to have the machinery marked in line with the UK? It says CI marking, I'm sure it's NI marking. Or
yeah,
CF.
so if it's being, this is an interesting point. Okay, so if it's being made solely for your use and you're not saying it to anybody else, I think there's something in the blue. The position is the same as what's in the blue guide, so it's worth looking into that. But in certain circumstances, it's being made just for you. I don't think it needs to be. Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on this one. I'd say generally speaking, it's been placed on the market. It needs UKCA from 2022. CE's fine for this year, basically. Paul, do you have any views on this one in particular?
No, that's fine. I mean, if any guidance really, I would direct people towards the, as far as we're concerned, PPE wise, towards the OPSS guidance documents, which are on the end of my presentation.
Okay. Well, we finally found somebody who's managed to trip you up. So we'll come back to you, whoever posed that question. And I know the backroom team will, I'll be able to identify who it came from. We'll talk to Benedict afterwards, and Paul can take a view on it as well. And we'll come back to you on a clearer answer on that particular issue. Okay, another one. If you have multiple products that are currently assessed to the same EU standards by EU Nobo, can these be approved en masse, or do they need individual recertification to UKCA? Not unlike the multiple products question I had. If you have multiple products that are currently assessed to the same EU standards by EU Nobo, can these be approved en masse, or do they need individual recertification to UKCA?
Well, as far as PPE is concerned, that technically there is no difference between CE or the standards that go into CE or UKCA. So for an approved body, a notified body, to transfer that detail, then really it should not be much more than a paperwork exercise for them to make that transfer successful. Bennett, have you anything to add to that?
No, that sounds right to me. I mean, essentially, it depends. It's worth approaching, your existing body to find out about the GB market, or if not that, approaching a GB body. But essentially, it's the position's the same. What you've done to get them certified for the EU market is the same, because the technical requirements and standards are also the same. The difference, maybe we talk about designated standards rather than harmonized standards.
Yes, okay. Yes, of which they are basically the same. I mean, over the last few years, notified bodies in the United Kingdom have spent a lot of time and resource on spreading themselves within the EU. So opening offices like the SI have done in Holland, Satra have done in Ireland, Cork, and making sure that they do have that EU representation so that they can continue to issue and have valid European certificate, CE certificate, as well as then carry on as an approved body in the UK for the UK Conformity Assessment mark.
Okay, thank you. I'm just watching the time, but the questions are still coming through thick and fast. We are a German company with a UK company as well. We have suppliers who manufacture parts for our systems that are installed in customer sites. We normally collate all of the CE marked equipment, install this, and then CE mark the entire completed system. How do we get our EU partners to become UKCA marked, or is that not needed?
Did you say parts or partners? Sorry.
Parts.
Yeah. So if they, no worries. So if they require conformity assessment, to use the UKCA mark, that certification will need to come from a UK approved body, right? If you self-declare, you'd self-declare against the rules for the UKCA marking, and as Paul mentioned earlier, there is this 1 year period, additional period from next year that applies now. So it's 2 years. It's 2 years this year till 2023, where you can use UKCA as a sticky label on the components or the overall product, essentially.
Okay. And again, watching the clock come up to the hour, if after January 22nd you import second-hand equipment, bear with me a second, the questions are coming so fast, they're rolling off the screen. If after January the 22nd you import second-hand equipment to the GB, to Great Britain, does the equipment need to comply to current regs and standards in the UK? Similar concept to importing into EAA at the moment.
Yeah, so a lot of this is based, so if a good's already been placed on the market, which if it's second-hand it already implies, so placed on the market before the end of last year, it can continue to circulate freely between the UK and the EU. So if it's already been placed on the market for the end of last year, it shouldn't require any remarking if it was compliant at the time it was placed on the market, and it doesn't actually pose like a product safety risk or issue later on.
Okay. Again, moving on to get as many questions in as possible. How does the end user determine when goods have been placed if supplied after the 1st of January 2022?
So the end user, if you think about the chain of economic operators, if you like, the end user doesn't have any obligations. But if you're a distributor or an importer or a manufacturer, you're someone who has obligations, right? So in terms of placing on the market, it's basically make it available for like sale, distribution, or supply, essentially. Usually it's going to be on the basis of like a contractual arrangement, whether that's a written contract, or it's like you've got an informal contract, or there's an email or something like that. It's usually how you determine placing on the market. Simply put, like a lot of the time, it's like someone's basically bought it, essentially. We're passing it to a distributor who's like moving it in the direction of someone who's bought it or will buy it.
Okay, and watching the time, I'm just going to squeeze in one last question. It says, just to clarify, I run the UK subsidiary of an Italian component manufacturer. Will the products imported need to be UKCA marked, in brackets, either by the manufacturer in Italy or by us in the UK, close brackets, to be sold into the UK market?
So I think, to be honest with you, that's something to work out with the supplier, essentially. To be honest with you, that's probably all I'll say on that.
Okay, Paul, do you need to add anything to that one before we close the questions?
Yeah, I think Ben's right there. It's got to be done, and that would be a discussion for them to have internally. But from the end of this year, we will need to see UKCA.
Okay. I have just seen another one squeeze in. It should be a short one in 20 seconds. Please clarify the term entered the market. Does this mean each individual purchase order or when the product type first became available for sale?
So entered the market isn't the key thing when thinking about placing on the market. Again, it's all about that contractual arrangement, essentially, the sort of like buying and selling of it. It's made available, it's gone to a distributor, someone's bought it, that sort of thing. On our placing on the GB market guidance, which is in the slides, it does include the definition we use of placing on the market. I've been sort of paraphrasing it to try and make it a bit more accessible, but it's a legal term, so there is a degree of that when talking through these concepts. Okay.
And just to say, if you go to BSIF downloads, we do have a document ourselves. We do have the link to the OPSS guidance there, but we also have our own document there on placing on the market. So you'll be able to have a quick read through there as well.
Excellent. Okay. Well, look, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for helping us out today. Extremely helpful and very much appreciated, I'm sure. As I always say at the end of these webinars, my apologies that we haven't been able to get to everybody's question. We will look at all of those questions that came in and play those back with answers to the attendees. That brings us to the end of the Q&A session. I'm hoping you can now see my screen again. And it's the formal close. Just before we do, a few thank yous. Fiona McGarry, who comes from the HSE and does much work for SHEP. In fact, quite honestly, SHEP wouldn't happen if it wasn't for Fiona, or indeed if it wasn't for Lydia from Filter Mist, who acts as our both contributor and secretary. She doubles up. And Rebecca Crossland from BISA, and last of all, of course, David Fries, the CEO, and Martina Stocker from BISA, for allowing us use of their platform, this GoToWebinar platform. Thank you very much indeed to everybody. Get the vaccine as soon as you can, stay safe, and have a very good end to the week. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.